pleasure to have Michael here. I know that this is a big week for AppNexus. They have full range of events. They've effectively taken over AdTech this week. So it's always a pleasure to have Michael speak about the industry. And I think we want to kind of start today with a kind of a helicopter view of what's going on, because it's been a big year. Can you believe it's November already? Seriously? It's fucking November. Unbelievable. And a lot's happened this year. A lot of big things have happened. Michael talked about the ad tech power games and a lot of his stuff earlier this year and at the AppNexus event. And sure enough, there has been a lot of big moves in this space. A lot of M&A, particularly some of the telcos now buying companies like AOL, which was a huge piece of M&A. But there's also been a number of sort of big trends, particularly around the big media companies like Facebook and Google, sort of aggregating news and squeezing their influence on the internet. And also, there's been sort of a weak awakening from publishers around programmatic and how they actually monetize their content. So, Michael, I know there's a lot of stuff to talk about today. Well, let's start first of all with the big media companies. The idea of Google, Facebook, Apple getting into the news business, becoming the distribution backbone for the internet, and how that affects everybody in this room and publishers as well. So it'd be good to start there. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, it's a fascinating move. I think publishers are, at the same time, excited to experiment in these channels and take advantage of some of the capabilities that these massive distributors and media companies are offering, but at the same time are rightly so very wary. I mean, content owners across every industry have been burned by feeding the beast and really giving up too much control over monetization, too much control over connectivity with customers and access to data and so forth. So I think that publishers are obviously wading in carefully, but I think it is signifying a larger overall trend, which is this is a dangerous moment for independent publishers. I think clearly we're seeing consolidation, not just of ad tech companies, but we're seeing consolidation of spend. Citibank came out with a report, I think it was last week, talking about how Google and Facebook are consolidating a massive amount of the internet's digital ad spend. And so, when you have massive players of that size and scale and data advantage and so forth, consolidating companies, consolidating spend, consolidating audiences, it's a moment of great risk, I think, for independent publishers.
It was funny, there was a piece in Digiday in the UK, it sort of highlights your point that next year both Facebook and Google will have 55% of the UK's digital advertising market, which is quite a chunk of money. But are we at this sort of this interesting sort of transition? I mean, everybody's talking about desktop, the cookies dead, et cetera, and the move to mobile. Are we sort of in that difficult transition where these companies will emerge because there is no other option at the minute, but the industry eventually will come up with sort of independent solutions to kind of address that?
Yeah. Well, I think there's no question that the power of these platforms is just massive and is increasing. At the same time, we are seeing the emergence of other competing platforms or aspiring competing platforms. And as we all know, I mean, as we think back 10 years to the dominant content and distribution platforms, including AOL and Yahoo and so forth, I mean, consumer tastes change and things change rapidly. So I don't think it's the end of independent publishing. And in fact, at AppNexus, one of the big things we're investing in, and we're going to be talking about this a lot this week, is the ad tech platform, the suite that we have built for publishers, which is a end-to-end monetization suite featuring everything from forecasting, ad serving, programmatic monetization, and at the end of the day, it's about helping publishers, helping them chart a path to independence, and being able to develop their own core competency in monetization, which is not the only piece of the puzzle, but a critical piece of the puzzle for really maintaining and building a strong independent business.
Let's still talk about publishers for a minute, actually, because we've seen this year the advent of header bidding. It's been talked about extensively in the press. It feels to me that it feels like a hack against DFP because of dynamic allocation, but it seems to be a thing in vogue. Our publishers kind of start thinking about how they work around monetization of their own inventory. Like the whole idea of holistic yield management is quite interesting because I have a sort of sideline publishing business that I work with a bunch of ad networks, and really I want is a complete auction. I want every impression to be competed against. So our publishers start becoming more self-aware around that and kind of moving more and more to that direction. Because it's quite interesting. Obviously, Google now are beta testing their own header bidder at the minute, so they see the risk. But is there sort of among publishers now becoming a little bit more self-aware about how they do things?
I think so. I mean, as I mentioned, publishers need help. This is a moment where they really need to take control of their own future in monetization. Google is doing whatever it can to maintain its walled garden around publisher monetization and this advantage that they've had in the market for decades with DFP being really the dominant publisher ad server. But I think publishers are voting with their feet by working directly with ad tech companies through header bidding, which is a bit of a hack, but at the end of the day gives them what they want, which is a holistic yield management capability for their inventory. And as I mentioned, they're voting with their feet. I think Hearst is going to be presenting some findings this week that says they looked at the top 1,000 publishers, and north of 20% of them now have implemented header bidding solutions, and that's increasing rapidly. A year from now, it's likely to be north of 50% of publishers that are implementing a header bidder solution. And I think it's pretty amazing. Like if you think of DFP and DoubleClick, they've effectively had a dominant market position for publisher ad tech since the mid-90s. Pretty amazing. I mean, can you think of any other technology that you rely on either in your personal life or in your business context that was effectively built in the mid-1990s? It's really remarkable. And so I think that market, for the first time, has never really had competition, is ripe for disruption. Publishers are not going to be passive and allow DoubleClick and Google to effectively dictate the rules of their monetization. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. We're trying to present publishers with some real choice and options in the marketplace. We have a client on stage at our summit tomorrow morning who ran YieldX forecasting against DoubleClick forecasting in a head-to-head bake-off and found 85% accuracy in YieldX and 55% in DoubleClick. It's a 30% delta. You can't very effectively monetize impressions that you can't forecast. And so I think that publishers see, and that's part of the reason why today, I think something like 50% of the top 100 DoubleClick publishers today use YieldX for forecasting because they need intelligence, they need systems, they need friends, and not just AppNexus, they need all of us, which I think comes to where header bidding is coming from. They want to do business with people in the marketplace who are aligned with their interests and providing them with the best possible monetization for their content. And so I think 2016 is a year where we're going to see publishers really shake things up.
Do you think that that's the end of the ad server then? I mean, I've heard so many people talk about header bidding as a sort of the end of the game for ad servers. So is that the case? And to your point, I mean, publishers say a lot of things, but migrating off an ad server is like having a lung transplant and a kidney transplant at the same time for most of them.
Yeah.
It's pretty hardcore, and the investment to do this is quite extensive. So will publishers do that? And why have they never woken up to the fact that that Google and even Facebook are the most conflicted companies on the face of the planet, right? They give their tech away for free and they make a shitload of money in media.
Well, because they're offering monetization as well, and I think that that's compelling to publishers at a time when, again, they're feeling in a lot of ways besieged. I wouldn't say that the ad server is irrelevant at this stage. I just think that the ad server was built to serve ads. It was built to, be very effective at ordering the sequence of ads and support a direct sold model that today is not in some cases, not even the predominant way of selling ads. And I think we're reaching a tipping point for programmatic sales channels versus direct sales channels in 2016 as well. We're doing some fascinating work now with Microsoft. Obviously, this has been very public, where Microsoft exited the ad sales business. We obviously are the programmatic technology behind Microsoft's business worldwide. In 9 countries, we work with AOL now, and in 50 or so countries around the world, we work with sales houses or independent parties. So we started this in October 1st with Microsoft, where we took 10 European markets and said, what would happen if we went 100% programmatic? And some of those markets had a long tradition of programmatic. By long, I mean like a year or two. And some of those really weren't doing very much programmatic at all. And we'll be talking publicly about the results, but let's just put it this way, it's been astounding. We're only a month into it, but so far there's been a substantial yield, net yield and improvement, and really about revenue parity from moving from a direct sales model to a programmatic model. And that's not even in a mature market, like mature programmatic like the UK or the US. And so I think the idea that an ad server is what a publisher needs in 2016 is just, an ad server is just one piece of the puzzle. I think what publishers need is they need either a suite or they need best of breed tools that play well together, some of which relate to the ad server, some of which relate to other capabilities. But as we think about the mediums of the future, I mean, if we're 5 years away from a world of immersive virtual reality as being one of the major platforms that consumers are adopting, how would a tag-based ad serving system play in an environment like that? I think we're going to have to, all of us as an industry, totally rethink the way that publisher ad tech works. I think there will be a place for the ad server, but I think the reason that publishers will be open-minded is, A, they really need to maximize revenue and yield at this moment, and in order to assure their own survival, especially in the face of these really incredibly powerful platforms, and the landscape is shifting.
We'll shift gears nicely into consolidation. I mean, we have seen a lot of acquisitions this year, some big landmark ones, particularly the AOL deal, which was pretty significant. Who would have thought that a telco would buy? I don't know what AOL is. It's a content/tech company, I guess. There's lots of different moving parts in that company. But are we seeing sort of a consolidation in the space? I'll caveat that by saying, there was a digital piece recently that said that VCs were now turning their back on the ad tech space because of the IPO market. It was, the success of particular companies that went public haven't done particularly well. So are we going to see more consolidation in the space, and what does that mean for independent ad tech, particularly with the media companies that are buying tech?
Well, it's true that the ad tech space is not getting funded. New companies aren't getting funded the way they were 6 years ago, let's say, in the United States. I don't think that in Europe you had the same level of kind of VC boom in ad tech that we did here in the US. And I do think we're going to continue to see significant consolidation in the space, but in 2 different buckets. One is, companies that may have been overfunded or, but need a home, basically, in order to be able to survive or thrive. AOL is a great example where they recently acquired Millennial Media, which, at this stage, obviously, itself was a combination of 3 or 4 different venture-backed companies that had had a difficult time. And I think that, that's a good example of one kind of consolidation that we're going to see, which is, companies may have been venture funded, maybe they weren't venture funded, but they need to be a part of something larger at this stage to have their own successful future. And then I think the second kind is, you're seeing all these large companies today who are trying to make a play in ad tech in order to be able to, really have a big play in digital advertising. And so whether it's, it's pretty amazing to see, as you said, the telcos, cable companies like Comcast, IBM, I was just talking to Jeremy from the Weather Company, out in the hallway. It's pretty fascinating to see their acquisition.
But that wasn't really an ad tech acquisition. That was more.
It wasn't, but could they lever that into an ad tech play? There's a lot of companies, Adobe, Oracle, Google, Facebook, who maybe a year or two ago weren't really significant players in the ad tech space, and today are making really significant plays. And so I do think that that's the second bucket. I do think we're going to see meaningful consolidation in both. And of course, that's just the cycle that the industry has always gone through.
But I know, but if these companies are kind of swallowed up by big media entities, is there a chance that we'll go back to that kind of walled garden closed system that we had many years ago? Are we just going through another cycle that we had a fairly open ecosystem via programmatic over the last couple of years, whether it's yourselves and other companies, kind of opened up a little bit, but then to kind of maintain control over media and agency spend, marketer spend, a lot of these guys are saying, no, we won't share our data, we won't do this, we won't do that. I think Amazon is a good example. Like they wouldn't let, a DSP like DBM touch their data. It's very much a wall. Kind of, this is my UI. You buy the stuff. We're not doing any kind of a share interoperability of data. So, is there a case that with all this consolidation, we're just going to go down the route of closed systems and, effectively more people working at UIs?
Yes, that's the path we're heading down right now. But the question is, long term or even midterm, is that a sustainable state? And I don't really think it is, because even if that's in the interests of the platform providers or media providers, as you might think of them, it's not really in the interest of the brands, I don't think, to not be able to leverage their data and not be able to buy seamlessly cross-platform. I think this is, again, comes back to cycles. And the brands and the agencies at the end of the day are the ones who are writing the checks. And I don't think that they're going to want to see too much of a turf war that just makes it really difficult ultimately to reach consumers. And so I do think clearly right now we are in a phase where people are erecting walls around their businesses and around their ecosystems as a way of capturing and retaining economics. But I don't think that it poses a long-term threat to the openness of the ecosystem.
What does it mean then for independent ad tech? A lot of people in this room would have companies that are not big media-based businesses. A lot of them are sort of building technology. What does that mean, these closed ecosystems, for sort of innovation in the space? In fact, I'll give my juice to AppNext. Is if you're looking to build a business in the ad tech space, you've got a platform you can build on top of and integrate and build businesses around which they have. But is it possible that on all these closed ecosystems that there won't be an independent ad tech space to thrive around and innovate?
It's possible. I think that if you look at what Google announced with YouTube this summer, they basically said YouTube is no longer going to be available through the ad exchange and will be exclusively available to DBM. So, one could, it's an incredibly aggressive move that I think is exactly what you just discussed. One could say, well, that's the end of independent video ad tech, as an example. And anyone who's got a video DSP should just pack up and go home. And in fact, our own video DSP product that we launched or relaunched earlier this year is doing extremely well, very fast growing. We looked at the numbers because Google is one of our first integrations. It was a very meaningful proportion of the inventory that our buyers were buying. And so what we did is what I assume everyone else has done, which is we just diversified the supply. And we've done distribution deals with a dozen probably other aggregators of video supply. And now Google is, I don't know exactly what the number is, but it's less than 10% of the supply that we're accessing. And will it give DBM an advantage in the market? Clearly, yes. Will it mean the end of anyone else? I don't think so, because I think that there's enough reach and enough volume out there to support independent businesses as well. So again, it really depends. It's sort of hard to forecast all the consequences of some of these moves. But we see independent video DSPs in the market. We see our own offering in the market succeeding, and it doesn't seem to really be the kind of game changer killer that one might think it would be.
Okay, one last question around the sort of the big media companies, tech businesses. I know I'm fascinated with Yahoo. Like outside of the US, Yahoo doesn't matter. Like nobody gives a damn, except for Japan, obviously. But in Europe, who cares about Yahoo? But here, it seems to be like everybody cares about Yahoo. Like Cara Weber, I think she just basically sleeps under a desk in Yahoo. She gets someone's stories about Yahoo. I don't know how she does it, but I'd be interested to know how you see it. I mean, from your perspective, having worked in the industry for a long time, they're in a pretty tight spot in terms of moving the needle in revenue. What's going to happen to that company, you think? Are they going to have to figure out whether they invest in their tech or decide whether they're a media company or a technology company?
Okay, well, obviously, the next 6 months are a pretty transformative period for Yahoo because they'll be divesting themselves of their Asian assets. And so the company will fundamentally look really, really different. And I think just a point of curiosity for all of us will be to see what Yahoo looks like from a revenue and a valuation perspective after that. I expect it's going to look like a much smaller company than we're accustomed to Yahoo thinking about. And who knows? I mean, there have been rumors that maybe it could be small enough that a private equity firm could come in, take the company private, and give it another chance to be a startup outside of the public market spotlight. I can attest to the fact that when I was at DoubleClick and we were a public company and then went private, it was a game-changing moment for the business. So remains to be seen. I think that 2016, though, obviously will be a really transformative and pivotal year for Yahoo.
They've got a lot of traffic. I mean, like they're the second biggest traffic site in the world, apparently, or it's the third biggest in the US. Sorry. So they've got assets, they've got things they can work on.
Yeah.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about ad blocking seems to be the topic of the day at the minute. Everybody's talking about ad blocking. It has numerous pieces. I wanted to talk about how we got here in terms of how we've sort of forgotten about user experience and moved into this world where it's almost become acceptable for a person to have free content and to use ad blocking based on the fact that they hate ads. I know it's kind of a there's multiple questions in there, but let's talk about the user experience first, and then obviously this trade-off between free content and advertising on the internet and how we square the wheel here. So what do you think that I say it as an industry, but as an industry, we should really be thinking more about the user experience when it comes to advertising?
I do. And I think that publishers are starting to. I think they're only now starting to really appreciate the true impact of latency on consumer experience. And also, I think that there's a real education challenge in the marketplace right now about the value trade, about the true impact on things like your battery life on your phone, if you're loading ads. And I think consumers need to think about holistically the value trade. Publishers need to do their part. I don't see ad blocking as being an existential issue for digital advertising in 2016, but I do see it as being an area where publishers and ad tech providers and brands, everyone's going to need to step up and deliver some novel, innovative solutions. I think industry groups play a key part as well. So yeah, I think that this is a wake-up call. I mean, it's the canary in the coal mine is the way I think about it. And consumers are sending a strong signal. I think it's a strong signal to DoubleClick, coming back to the point we were talking about earlier as well, where ad tech companies and networks have been forced to do some pretty gnarly workarounds and put JavaScript on the page and do some things that have probably not been in the consumer interest, but have been required because of the difficulty in integrating with the DoubleClick publisher ad tech stack. And so I expect that we'll see some of that change in 2016 as well.
But we had an ad blocking panel at ATS London, and there was nearly a punch-up on stage between Ben Barocas and Roy Carty, who's the CMO for Shine, which are basically working with the telcos. And I just felt that Roy was not really seeing it from a publisher's point of view. I mean, from my own, we started off as a small blog, and we depended on advertising. So there seems to be a disconnect between the value of the content versus what the user is getting. Do you think that part?
Was he saying ad blocking is?
He literally compared ad blocking to rape on stage twice. It was ridiculous. Like, I'm not joking you. Twice. No means no. And I was going, what? Really? So yeah, it wasn't any punch up in the auditorium afterwards as well. But is there a disconnect between the value of the content created and what the publisher should be getting back? Should the user be understanding there is actually some kind of economic exchange here, right? I create great content, you read it, and I can serve an ad to you. Do you think that's kind of that the user needs to understand that?
I think so, and I think probably everyone here would think so as well. I mean, raise your hand if you think that the value trade needs to be better understood and that we have to take partial responsibility and accountability for helping that along.
Don't be afraid, put your hands up. There you go.
We've got a lot of hands.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very heated conversation, and I think that it feels to me there's certain people kind of propelling this as well. I don't know if the problem's as big as gamers, for instance, right? If you're a gamer, right, the last thing you want to see is an ad because you're trying to play the game, right? That's your thing. So they have an ad blocker. So I think is the problem a little bit more pronounced, a bit overblown. Do you think as well?
I mean, you can already block ads in television. You can skip ads. I think brands need to find ways to reach consumers that are, less intrusive, less, more consistent with user experience, and obviously that's happening. I mean, that's why probably the most pronounced trend in the industry this year has been the shift to adopting native formats, and so it's already happening.
Okay. So if we have 5 minutes left, Michael, so just looking at it's the end of the year now, but looking into 2016. What do you see the key areas for next year, for the next 12 months? So, I mean, if we could pick maybe 3 areas that are really, really going to be hitting the headlines in ad tech next year, what do you think they will be?
Yeah. Well, we already talked about consolidation. I think that's definitely going to be a pronounced trend. I think there's a huge opportunity in helping publishers and giving them more choice, which is obviously what's motivating our major investments into the publisher ad tech space. Publishers really are struggling to chart an independent path, and the transition from print to digital was difficult. From online to mobile is proving even more difficult, and I think that they really need fantastic decision systems and support in order to be able to monetize effectively. Let's see, number 3, viewability, without question. Viewability is an unstoppable force. It's really just, in the early stages still. But, I think that the industry is moving to 100% viewable standard. We acquired a company middle of last year called Lenti. It's now been fully integrated into our platform and offered for free to both buyers and sellers. So people have the option to transact only on viewable impressions at this stage, and it just seems everyone we're talking to in the industry is intending to move toward that standard in 2016. So I think that that's a positive step and will result in increased accountability and an increased recognition that really this has the capacity to be the most accountable medium out there. And so I think that's going to be a pretty hot topic in 2016 as well.
Michael, thanks very much. Great overview for the year, and good luck with this week as well. So thank you very much.
Hey, thanks.
Round of applause for Michael, please.